folks, I'm Denise Howell, and next up on This Week in Law, I am joined by Evan Brown, Ali Sternburg, and Sam Glover. We are hooked on the feeling that you're going to want to watch this show. We're going to talk about old music and new business models, and it's stalking cats and dogs. We're going to talk about robots, jobs, and the law, and lots more next on This Week in Law.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for This Week in Law is provided by CashFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Twill, This Week in Law with Denise Howell and Evan Brown, episode 271, recorded August 15, 2014. A hero named Kevin Bacon. Help support Twit with your Amazon purchases. Visit twit.tv/Amazon, click on the Amazon banner, and shop as usual. It doesn't cost you anything, and it helps support Twit. That's twit.tv/Amazon, and we thank you for your support. Hi, folks. I'm Denise Howell, and you're joining us for This Week in Law. We're really, really excited that you've joined us this week because we have a wonderful panel of folks to tell you about everything that's going on and their special insights into all that is important at the intersection of technology and law. So without any further ado, let's introduce them to you and get going with this, shall we? My co-host, Evan Brown, is back. Hello, Evan.
Hi, Denise. And yes, it's great to be back. Seems like a long time out for a couple of weeks. But, had a great time in visiting Colorado and enjoying the mountains there. But no place I'd rather be right now than here on Twill with you talking about this stuff. And looking forward to our conversation as always.
Me too, so much. It's great to see you. And we've got sort of back-to-back representation from the CCIA, that's the Computer and Communications Industry Association, and also Project Disco, the great blog that we mentioned to you last week, because this week we have Ali Sternburg joining us. Hello, Ali.
Hi, great to be here.
Hi, great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us. And also joining us from the Lawyerist blog is Sam Glover. Hey, Sam.
Hey. Good to be here.
Good to see you. Nice to meet you.
Mm-hmm.
Am I correct in assuming that if you call a blog ist, like Lawyerist or Gothamist or LAist, there's a good deal of snark involved? Is that what the ist implies?
I guess that was not my intention. I think lawyerist means one who lawyers, but yeah, we kind of do the snark thing anyway, so maybe that's part of it. Yes. Yeah.
Exactly. So snark is good. It helps get us through life, I think, as long as, the snark controls are also in place. A healthy level of snark versus an unhealthy level of snark. We will be talking about that kind of thing later on the show. But right now, I think, I don't know, I need to go around and ask people if they've seen Guardians of the Galaxy yet, because I've seen it twice, and it has been on my mind as I've been prepping for the show this week. So who's with me?
I haven't seen it yet, but I mean, believe it or not, my 8-year-old son is the one who's providing the motivation for this. So I'm not quite sure how to feel about that fact right now, whether, if it's going to be appropriate for him or not. He's had some peers to go see it, but there's a real good article in Wired this month too about it that sort of goes into the historical context of it all and the origins of it as a comic book phenomenon. So I'm definitely more than sufficiently intrigued to go see it, but I haven't seen it yet. So interested to hear what everybody else is doing.
Yes, hopefully we can intrigue you further after our discussions today. Ali, have you seen it yet?
I have not seen it yet, but I love superhero movies and definitely plan to see it, especially after hearing about the soundtrack is important too. So
yeah. How about you, Sam? Am I the lone Guardians viewer on the show, even though we're going to talk about it?
You are. My geek movie partner has already seen it, and so I'm kind of left out in the rain here. So I've got to make a date with myself to go watch it.
All right. Well, we're going to get you all enlisted, and we're going to start out talking about that and some other stories at the intersection of entertainment and law. So, Guardians of the Galaxy, the wonderful comic, wacky movie, just killing the box office right now, is also, I guess it's no surprise that as of August 11th, Torrent Freak reported it, as it was. I guess it is kind of a surprise to me anyway that it was only the 8th most pirated movie for the week ending August 11th. But I can only surmise that that's because what they're listing. I don't check these Torrent Freak lists of who's topping the torrent charts that frequently, but the on this list, the Guardians of the Galaxy movie is listed as only an HD cam version. So I don't know. I mean, I guess that's what they've got to work with. So that's what people are torrenting, and I suspect that it will jump up as the movie gains popularity and buzz. It's hysterical. This is the only movie I can think of ever in my life that I felt compelled to go see again 2 days after I saw it the first time, with my son, who is 10, Evan, not 8. So that may make a difference. There's some language and really mostly, of course, there's violence, not bloody, awful violence, but a lot of like shoot 'em up, huge explosions and etc. kind of violence. So yeah, from a parental standpoint, you might want to check Common Sense Media and see what their take on the appropriate age would be. But it is so funny. And part of what makes it so funny and wonderful is this quirky soundtrack composed entirely of 60s and 70s tunes that is now the #1 selling album on the Billboard 200, which just absolutely floors me that the movie makers were actually able to put together this quirky, campy, creaky old soundtrack, and it's just going gangbusters. It's called The Awesome Mix, and I won't give away, for all of you and all of you watching who haven't seen the movie, the significance of the cassette tape that we're seeing now on the video. But it is just this great mix of old music and provides the great, amazing backdrop and is an integral part of the movie. But I wanted to talk about, having this old music at the top of both the download and CD sales charts, what that means in the digital era, old music and new business models. One thing that occurred to me is that everyone who has been lobbying for these incredibly long copyright terms that we have in the United States, Life plus 70 at the moment, just got a huge shot in the arm to their position that, if you can take something this old and make it this profitable, I guess that militates toward a long copyright term, doesn't it, Allie?
I think that's one way of looking at it. I think that if anything, it shows that really good quality music, there will always be an interest in it. And I think that they could be selling it even if some of these songs weren't still in copyright. I do think there is, I don't know if this was one of the reasons you were interested in it, but there is an interesting wrinkle about the pre-72 sound recordings that doesn't actually come up that often. And
yeah,
I looked up the songs. Some of them were pre-72, which was kind of a unique, really niche issue in copyright that Matt talked about a little bit last week.
Right, and it comes up on the show, and I don't think any of us understand it very well. So if you want to just flesh it out for us here, since we're on the topic.
Yeah, so due to a lot of the way that copyrights changed over time, sometimes piecemeal, sometimes in the big acts like the 76 Act and the 09 Act. So yeah, sometimes things will get changed, a lot of things at once, and in other situations, they will be responding to small niche areas or different interest groups who come in to ask for things. For sound recordings, due to the way that was codified, songs that were recorded prior to February 15th, 1972 are protected just under state law and not federal law. And because for each song there are two copyrights. There's a copyright in the musical work and the composition that would be owned by the songwriter, and then often is owned by a publisher. And then there's a copyright in each different sound recording, each different cover version will have its own different copyright. And so the publishing side, all of those are protected by federal law, but the side owned by the labels is the ones that are pre-72 are just protected by state law, which and one of the reasons that's come up recently in litigation is whether the DMCA safe harbor applies, and there's some discrepancy over whether that's available for these things that are just protected by state law. So a brief we filed a couple weeks ago argued that the DMCA does apply, but we'll kind of have to wait and see how that goes in the next couple months.
Okay, it brings up too, since this is a mix of music, and that's what makes the particular blend of the Awesome Mix Volume 1 quite so awesome. It's just that it's taking a bunch of music and putting it together. Of course, there's nothing new about that. People have been doing it themselves, and commercial companies do it. But I thought it would be interesting to talk about the legality of mixes and making your own mix, given the popularity of this soundtrack and its interwoven nature with the film. Because mixtapes, even though we haven't had tapes in a very long time, continue to be an important part of particularly the rap music industry, and people do go after artists who take their music and mix it up with other popular artists and market themselves that way. Evan, do you have any thoughts on the current state of the law re mixtapes?
Well, I mean, as far as what the current state is right now, I mean, it appears that sort of by default, the idea of making a personal copy of a track of music is not something the RIAA is going to vigorously go after. I mean, when was it back in like the Grokster litigation, or was in some of the litigation pushing 10 years ago now, where there was that famous admission by one of the lawyers for the recording industries, where he essentially conceded that they wouldn't go after an individual for making a copy of a song. So if somebody can brief me on whether there's been any actual resolution of that issue in any kind of court decision, or certainly I'm not aware of any amendment to the Copyright Act in the meantime that addresses that issue. There's sort of like this idea for personal use. It's one of those things that just happens and it's not really there. I think a larger phenomenon is interesting, and on a larger scale of history too, about how the rights holders in these situations have recognized the dangers of making a personal copy to the revenue stream, where there are certain provisions in the Copyright Act that don't allow for the selling of, I forget exactly how it goes, and I forget exactly where it is because I should have studied up on this before, but where there are certain restrictions on being able to sell blank media in connection with actually renting out audio recordings. This goes back to the idea of where there would be a record store that also sold the blank tapes. And I think it's in Poland now, of all places. I remember seeing something about this recently, where there's talk among the among commentators about copyright, about a tax on blank media, which I guess also comes into our system as well too. I realize I'm talking generalities. I hope somebody can fill in some details. Maybe that's you, Ali, on all of this. But personal copies are a thing, are a real thing that people will do, have always done. The mixtape is a cultural phenomenon. It's a thing that many of us who grew up in the 70s and 80s and into the 90s can identify with. So it sort of engages in this interesting dance with copyright, both at what the fundamental, the actual black letter law would say, and more just as sort of a normative acceptance of how people are going to use this content.
Yeah, Ali, do you have anything to add on the topic of mixtapes and the law?
Yeah, I've always been really interested in sampling. I'm a huge fan of mashups. It's probably the type of music that I consume the most. And a lot of these DJs put them online for free on their websites because they, from whatever kinds of different wrong but bright line things about how many seconds you can sample, or just out of just fear about ambiguities about fair use, and a lot of times they just end up choosing to have their business model be more about live concerts and just finding different ways to make money rather than on their recorded music. But I think that there's a lot of history there in the recorded music industry didn't really pay that much attention to hip hop at first, but then when it started to become a lot more commercial, that's when they started to be suing a lot of these older artists. And I think that that there's been some really interesting research done about whether the Beastie Boys albums and a bunch of other like really classic albums could never have been made today if they had just the cost of licensing all the different samples is completely prohibitive, and like and it's just thinking about how much these albums have influenced the way that music developed. It is really discouraging when copyright acts as a disincentive to creativity when it should really be doing the exact opposite. Yeah. There are a lot of interesting sampling cases out there. I wrote a post on Disco called about something about a question about 6 seconds, like can you infringe copyright in 6 seconds? That I wrote about when Twitter introduced Vine, maybe a year or two ago, and just kind of talking about the different case law and whether that was at all influenced on the Bridgeport cases. These are some classic sample cases in the Sixth Circuit where in one of them the judge quotes the Bible, thou shalt not steal and get a license or do not sample, and that really so there have been a lot of cases that have really in music that have disincentive that have been kind of a fair music is probably one of the creative the different creative industries that has that like where fair use is the least available, it seems like, and that's concerning because music is awesome and you don't want the law to be hurting its development. So
isn't there one particular Bridgeport case that's really bad to sort of make the reality what it is you're saying, Allie, that fair use is the least available? Isn't there one Bridgeport case?
There's a great
it's like a Sixth Circuit.
It's moved around to a couple of different law schools, but someone put together a site that compares all the different with all the different music licensing cases and sampling cases, and it compares the two songs. And that one actually, like, this is before transformativeness became a big part of the fair use analysis. That sample is unrecognizable. It was like slowed down, and you could barely hear it in both songs. And if that were decided today, things could be different because transformativeness has become a big part of the fair use analysis. But there are a couple. One of the other Bridgeport cases, the judge even found that it was transformative, and it still wasn't fair use. That's literally the only time I've ever seen a judge find something transformative and then not fair use. So it's very interesting law in that circuit.
So is that why Girl Talk has not gotten any trouble for his recordings? Are they transformative enough to be fair use, or is he just so popular that if they went after him, he'd get in trouble? Because when you say that the Beastie Boys recordings or whatever couldn't be made today, but here we've got an artist who's entirely samples.
Yeah. I've heard people make that claim before, that just because that they don't want to sue him because they're afraid that they would lose, and then that a lot more of that would become legal and there'd be more certainty. So maybe they're just staying away from it. I'm a big fan of the Girl Talk style. Where I actually a couple years ago I found out that he had his own station on Pandora, which it's cool to think that's your own kind of genre, and other music that's also built upon samples and like the different kinds of beats can also be seen as its own style of music. It's really cool recognition. Big fan.
Just want to clarify that despite what I said earlier about Lifeless 70 getting a shot in the arm from this, I'm not a fan at all of long copyright terms. I just think that the fact that this commercial music is so old and is being so currently used right now is something that we're going to hear about from folks in that camp.
It's just too bad that you actually have to quantify it. I guess the law actually does have to draw the line somewhere, whether it's 14 years, whether it's 28 years, whether it's life plus 50, whether it's life plus 70 or whatever, because what the real measure should be is the half-life of the nostalgic effect. And that can take different forms at different times. Right at this particular moment in history, there's a interest in those songs from the 60s and 70s because of the Guardians of the Galaxy release. If you remember back to the 90s, the late 90s, there was a renaissance of swing dancing. Do you remember that? And you had the styles of different artists who were hearkening back to the styles of the 20s and 30s. and then the 40s, for swing dancing. So it just goes to show it's too bad you actually have to draw a line somewhere, because if we're going to start from the assumption that if it's popular, it ought to be monetizable. And I know that that's pretty faulty platform on which to stand. But, if that's going to be the basis on which you say that that's what will promote the progress, then there ought to be, or it would be nice if there was some sort of wishier, washier way to do it.
Wishier, washier way.
Or wishy-washier. I don't know I don't know where the modifier goes. Anyway, go ahead.
Lots of people in RSC have been talking about Spotify and it being a great tool, and Allie was just mentioning Pandora. I think it's interesting that in addition to being able to buy the DRM free MP3s of the Awesome Mix Volume 1, the soundtrack to Guardians of the Galaxy movie, you can buy them in CD, and you can buy the MP3s on iTunes and in Amazon. On Spotify, there are 2 Awesome Mix playlists that you have to check out. One, and we were talking about this, we named a show recently, More Disney Than FIFA, pointing out Disney's sort of hands-off, we're not going to prosecute you approach to people remixing songs from Frozen. Here, the record label that actually put out the soundtrack is Hollywood Records, and it's part of Disney Music. And they have their own Spotify playlist that is all the tracks from the soundtrack. So they're actually competing with purchases of the music by having this playlist on Spotify. For anyone who's a Spotify subscriber and you don't feel you need to have a physical CD in your hand or downloadable MP3s, there's something that comes with your subscription that Hollywood Records has put out. And then the other thing, just to highlight for fun for anyone who's into this music at all, is Entertainment Weekly. I guess had been interviewing the director and got some insights as to what music might be on because there will be a sequel to this movie. They made it very clear at the end. And there is an Awesome Mix Volume 2 that begins playing at the end of the film. So Entertainment Weekly did its purely hypothetical but sort of well-educated guess as to tracks that we might see on the second mix. And they have even more tracks than are on the first one, and it's equally fun to listen to. So go check out Entertainment Weekly's list on Spotify too. I don't know that there's that much more to talk about the movie, aside from its, there was one more thing I wanted to mention, and that is, and I don't know if there's any sort of legal tie-in, but I suppose with the legality of mixtapes and the fact that we all, any of us who grew up in the 1970s and 1980s and don't purge all our stuff as frequently as we should, has a box of mixtapes sitting around somewhere, actual cassette tapes that look like
mine was stolen out of my car in college.
Oh, that's a tragedy.
I did. I had this great big shoebox of mixtapes, and somebody stole them out of my car. So I had none. I've had to reassemble it on iTunes.
Right. Well, there certainly has been a resurgence in the popularity of vinyl in the last several years, and I'm wondering whether this movie will do a similar thing for Walkmans and cassette tapes. Because, as I said, my 10-year-old, who's now seen it twice, he desperately wants my old Walkman. He wants me to go through all the stuff and find it and start playing tapes in it. So, maybe all those mixtapes that we were making will find a new life too. Let's talk about a couple of other entertainment-related stories. Allie, you blogged recently about Community moving to Community, the TV show. Very funny TV show. But I guess did not get renewed for another television season. But that's okay because it's going to have a 6th season anyway on Yahoo. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So I think that this is just an example. As I wrote in the post, it's an example of a lot more opportunities for media consumption. Like I compared it with the new original program on Netflix, and Amazon has their own programming, and I think Hulu might have original programming, and it's a lot of times these new sites have a lot more freedom to kind of break more boundaries in what they're talking about and what they can say and do, and also in their different distribution models. I know that Netflix gets a lot of attention for House of Cards and Orange is the New Black when they release everything all at once. Like they don't try to have artificial windowing or anything, and that just it seems like they really understand how consumers want to consume content and when they want it in a way that's available and affordable and convenient. And there's a few other times I've found some quotes from Kevin Spacey who has said, like, give consumers what they want when they want it, like in the format they want it, and they'll pay for it. They don't want to pirate it if you're making things available in a 21st century way. And so I think that this is really so community. So Yahoo is another service that's getting into this, and I think that this is encouraging. It's a lot more competition, less gatekeepers for showing what entertainment you can have in your house. So I think it's universally a good thing, and also it means that Community is a great show, and it's awesome that they're going to have their 6th season and maybe a movie. So it's a good thing.
It is a good thing. It has legal ramifications on a couple of fronts. Number one, the increased competition in the world of distribution, entertainment distribution, is a good thing and is something that winds up driving regulatory policy kinds of decisions. Also, this all sort of comes into the net neutrality debate too. If more and more entertainment is going to move off of conventional cable or satellite delivery and into a more net-related delivery system, then net neutrality becomes, even more front and center. So it's just another example of why that's important. Really? Let's see. Let's move on to the very sad passing of Robin Williams and its impact on the torrenting world. Another story over at Torrent Freak points out that in the hours after his death, Pirate Bay was subject to many, many searches for his entire body of work, of people going back and looking at all of his great old movies. Of course, not actually paying the estate for those movies or the studios by torrenting them. So, whereas with the Guardians of the Galaxy movie, what we're seeing and what our discussion focused on today, as far as the music that people want to get, is there are so many legal ways to get that music that I haven't seen a whole lot of stories. In fact, I went out and affirmatively searched for stories about piracy of that music, and it just doesn't seem to be something that is concerning anyone because there are so many legal ways. And at $8.99 on iTunes or Amazon, that's not a hefty price tag for something to climb up the Billboard charts with. But here, when you look at all of the movies that people immediately got nostalgic for in having their own memories of Robin Williams and how he impacted their lives, looks like the torrents and the illegal downloading definitely got a huge boost from the fact that people suddenly were interested in going back and reviewing his body of work. Evan, any thoughts on this?
Oh, just to riff on what you're saying there. I mean, it's sort of maybe this is the more unpopular perspective to take on this, but I don't know that it's right to look at figures of greater numbers of torrenting of his work as really a meaningful tribute. If you wanted to, tribute him in a meaningful way, buy the content and benefit the estate. So there's definitely a couple ways of looking at this.
Yeah, I don't think people probably look at it as a tribute necessarily. They probably don't even think that, I'm somehow harming him or his estate or his memory by doing this. They're very emotional and visceral and thinking, I really need to see Dead Poets Society again, and I need to see it now, and I don't own it. I don't know. I mean, my argument falls apart because it's probably quite easy to find his movies on legal sites as well, and I bet if we looked at those numbers, those shot up too. So, Allie, what do you think?
Yeah, to tie back in a few things we've been talking about so far. I know you mentioned that Torrent Freak has their list of 10 most pirated TV shows and 10 most pirated movies. There's been some research in the past comparing that list with a site called Can I Stream It? I think it's canistream.it, so on the Italian domain. That you can search a movie on there and see what different services have free streaming, can let you rent it, or you can buy it. And a lot of times, for when those movies are really new, they're still in theaters, or they're trying the industry is trying to window them in some other way. So that the newer ones don't tend to be as available. There it is, awesome. And but I would expect that most of the older movies are more available. So I think that I would expect there to be some lawful ways to watch most of the movies.
I mean, here's the deal. It turns out.
Yeah. Sorry?
It turns out that the Pirate Bay is actually a really good user experience. And I'll just go ahead and admit that I know that from experience. If you can't find something easily, like I'll buy it. You know, if it's on iTunes or I can stream it on Netflix, I'll totally buy it. But if I can't do that, there have been times where something's basically not available online. And if I can't download it, even for a fee, then there's a chance I might want it enough to just go and get it. While you were talking, by the way, I looked, and both Amazon and iTunes are saying that their sales of Robin Williams stuff is soaring too. And so I think there's this question of, are the people who are pirating, are studios actually losing money, or are those people who are doing it just because it's convenient and they probably wouldn't pay for it no matter what?
Right.
That doesn't mean it's right or legal or should be. But I think if you look at back when Game of Thrones was in like season 3, it hit Pirate Bay right away, and it was getting downloaded like crazy. And I don't know if it was the director or the producer or whatever said, "Great, we love that because it shows that it's popular, and we know that our success is somewhat tied to the distribution of the movie." Book writers know this. It's way more important. It's way harder to get exposure than it is to get book sales once people know who you are. So get it out there, and even if it's being pirated, that's ultimately probably a good thing for your show or your movie, which doesn't mean it has to be legal. But
right, yeah. How else are you gonna get an audience? The internet makes that easier than ever before. Actually, I had seen a BuzzFeed post. I just found it. It was called "Where to Watch Robin Williams Work Right Now," and it looks like they have that everything is available on either Netflix or iTunes or Hulu and Amazon. So they're all over the place in different services, but it does seem that most of them are available lawfully. So that is definitely encouraging.
Yeah, it really is. Let's move on, sticking with the Robin Williams theme, however, to something related to the social web. Oh, and before we get into this, I will just mention that our intern, Sando, let me know before the show that World of Warcraft, speaking of tributes, does tributes for people who are well-liked by the players, known to have played the game. And I guess Robin Williams was a really big gamer. And the World of Warcraft has let it be known, they have not announced what they're going to do, that they're responding to a petition that players launched to memorialize him somehow in the game. And they've said, yeah, we're on it. We're going to do that. But they haven't disclosed exactly how they're going to do it. In fact, Robin Williams liked gaming so much that he named his daughter Zelda after the Legend of Zelda. Zelda is about 25 years old and a popular entertainer in her own right. And unfortunately had some very bad times with her social media accounts in the wake of her father's demise. And in fact has abandoned her Twitter and Instagram accounts because she was being sent, terrible, terrible things involving, Photoshop pictures of her father, et cetera. So I tossed this out to our group here to talk about a topic that comes up over and over again, harassment on social media. And the particular wrinkle on this one is they don't seem to have been threats against her. They were just things meant to make her feel terrible. So, Evan, do you think that, I mean, I know Twitter has said they're going to take action and review their policies about terminating accounts and what sort of conduct is acceptable and not in the wake of these events. But is there a legal angle here? Does the law get involved when people are merely made to feel awful?
Well, I mean, I guess the ways we would start looking at this from a legal standpoint is first to evaluate whether there's any criminal conduct, and maybe not. More meaningfully, we could probably look at whether there's any civil cause of action that would arise from this. If you were able to trace down the individual who is doing this, the first thing that comes to mind is maybe there's some intentional infliction of emotional distress or what have you. This is kind of outrageous conduct like this. I mean, the larger picture, of course, is people are never going to stop. Some people are never going to stop being idiots, and no matter what happens, no matter how hard we try to drive in positive norms and how optimistic we become about the world, there's always going to be this negative dark side that's going to come out in the worst of ways, especially fueled by the perceived anonymity that one has online, which sometimes work if you're an effective Tor user and the government hasn't infiltrated your machine. So anonymity is a questionable thing here. So there's also this question of, what's the intermediary's role? Because people are quick to say, Twitter, Facebook should have done more or should do more in these types of situations to prevent abuse. And yes, of course, they should. But I don't know where that comes about. That's an even more difficult place, I guess is what I should say, to determine what the intermediary's role should be from a legal standpoint, because, of course, there are these protections from Section 230 for most civil liability that's occasioned by information provided by third parties. And I would look to cases like Doe versus MySpace from a few years ago, that litigation that arose from somebody being assaulted by somebody they had met on MySpace, physically assaulted in the real world from somebody they'd met up with. So I think we do have some, at least, guideposts for the intermediary liability on all this. Suffice it to say that it's really the intermediary is the last party we should look to from the legal standpoint to be obligated to do something. But from a normative standpoint, from an ethical, just from a good behavior standpoint, sure, intermediaries ought to be proactive while not overly constraining speech on these platforms.
Right, and intermediaries have the additional responsibility if a law has been broken and an investigation is ongoing of deciding whether they're going to comply with law enforcement and turn over information about otherwise anonymous users. So if they might not have direct liability, they still have some sort of responsibility for ensuring that the people who do are dealt with. And Twitter has been one of the forefront companies in saying, we will go to the mat on our users' information. We will protect their accounts and anonymity as much as we possibly can. So I think this puts them in an interesting kind of situation. I don't believe, I haven't read anything about a criminal investigation flowing from this, and I don't even know if there would be criminal liability for this. I think the state cyber bullying and harassment statutes are all over the map as to what they will tolerate and not. And here we seem to have people, again, it's all just kind of general, but the reporting on it says that people photoshopped pictures of her father's body and sent them to her and insinuated that she was somehow to blame for her father's death. So again, we're not talking about someone saying, I'm going to come after you. We're not talking about a lot of the other kinds of stories that, we've tragically seen over the years where people have been threatened or stalked or otherwise made to feel that they were in personal danger. But certainly no one would argue that these are hate messages as well. So I think we're in.
I think isn't it a similar problem to the open letter that Jezebel posted the other day about all of the, the rape imagery and Photoshops and stuff they get due to the way that Gawker has anonymous accounts that you can use. And I think it's similar to the, Anita Sarkeesian and her videos about women in video games. And it's similar to the experiences of many women who are just online, and that we've been hearing so much about lately, and they're not threats or necessarily defamation or anything actionable. They're just people being jerks. And do we want to effectively legislate people being jerks? Because that's what we're really talking about here. I'm not saying it's wrong to want to do that, but I think coming up with a solution that isn't easily abused is difficult. And I think that's probably why Twitter has dragged its feet on this for so long, because it's just as easy for the trolls to turn around any sort of system that's built to prevent bullying by calling the victims the bullies and getting them shut down. And that's happened before. I'm trying to think of an example, but I know that's happened when you try to institute a system like that. So, Twitter has said that they're going to do something about this finally, although they're vague on the details. But it seems sometimes the punishment is worse, or the solution is worse than the harassment, because it just leads to more. So it's a problematic thing. And if you go back to sort of just generally how catcalling affects women on the streets, you can't shut people up, but you can have a social response. And on the social web, I think that's part of what is happening right now, is because people are speaking out like Jezebel and like Anita Sarkeesian and like Zelda Williams. I think we're starting to see that the trolls are, hopefully at least, the trolls are being outed and called to the mat for their actions, and maybe that sort of pressure will gradually change the tone online, so that people will start behaving like human beings to one another again.
What do you think, Allie? Do sites have a responsibility to step in where there is no specific law to prevent this kind of conduct?
I think that Evan gave a great overview of the importance of intermediary liability and safe harbors, like under Section 230 of the CDA for things that are not intellectual property, and then there's the DMCA 512 safe harbors for things that are copyrighted. I think that these kinds of limitations on service provider liability have helped the internet expand. And made there a lot more platforms for expression, and that's what's really important. I do think that in some situations there might be things that service providers can do, but I think the most important thing to counteract hateful speech is more openness, more speech, and again, as Sam was saying, to more like people trying to change their behaviors. I really appreciate what Sam was saying about, and just recognizing that there are a lot of it can be really hard to be a woman on the internet. A lot of people face a lot of abuse, and I think that it's great that there's services like Twitter are so open about it. I know Twitter's head of safety, she herself is on the internet under a pseudonym. There's a really interesting Forbes article about her, and I think that, and also victim blaming is also really problematic. I think the most important thing is to focus on the people who are saying these hateful things and try to influence them, because while also maintaining free expression and privacy, there's a lot of concerns at play. But I do think that hopefully over time things will be better, nicer place on the internet. So.
Will Wheaton has the conduct policy for the internet, which is "Don't be a dick." He certainly didn't invent the phrase, but he has really popularized it. And that's the rule that everybody wants to enforce, but it's just hard to enforce that rule. So we do in our comments on Lawyerist. It's we're a website for lawyers, so we don't swear, but we definitely, if somebody's just being ad hominem, if they're just off the point and just being jerks, then we'll just delete the comment. But we can't stop people from making it in the first place, and that's what I'd hope to see happen, is that we can stop people from making those comments, by teaching them not to be jerks. There's an interesting post on Reddit, and I haven't gone back to see if there's a new update, but a woman just realized that her husband, who she says is a kind and loving man, has his way to blow off steam is being a troll on Tumblr. And he is racist, and he is sexist, and he's horrible. And she told him that he needed to stop. And he said he'd think about it and didn't, and so she kicked him out of the house. And this is obviously just on Reddit. I have no idea if it's a story or not, but it's sort of
and I'm sure there weren't any other issues. I'm sure there weren't any other issues between them to begin with. But anyway, go on.
She claims not, but she also claims to be pregnant with their child, which it either makes it a horrible story or makes it less believable. But that it's an interesting scenario. The trolls are there. I guess according to her, he came right out and said they don't feel like real people. I started fooling around on the internet when people didn't feel like real people, and so everybody was jerks to each other because we didn't think there were real people on the other end. And now everyone is on the internet, right? There's no online or offline. That's a meaningless distinction at this point. Your friends and neighbors and family are all online, and so to treat people online any differently than you would treat somebody at a store or at the school or something is foolish. But there are plenty of people out there who seem to be incapable of getting that. So.
I think it's really interesting that you and Allie, Sam, both thought of this story in terms of Zelda Williams as being harassed because she's a woman and Robin Williams' child. I thought when I read this story, I thought it's Robin Williams' child. This would be happening whether she were a daughter or a son, perhaps.
I don't know if that's true.
But maybe not.
Well, it might have been. I was thinking of it more in that I think the harassment was at the level that you have to look at. The only analog I can think of is harassment of women that has been getting a lot of publicity in recent months, maybe years. But I can't think of another person. And I guess the only other person, the people who tend to get harassed on the death of a family. You can look into the past to see stuff like Matthew Shepard and the harassment that his family received, and the Fred Phelps type of picketing at his funeral is another example of that. But I just think that's sort of the closest analog that I can come up with. And I got two little girls too, so I suppose I'm especially sensitive to that sort of thing. So.
All right, well, let's do another social web related story, and what's legal and what's not is also greatly at issue here. This has to do with the hotel. I think it was in upstate New York. Let me pull up the name of the hotel here. Bear with me while the page loads. Union Street Guest House. It's in the Hudson River Valley. And what they decided to do was they would, from time to time, I suppose it's a small hotel, they would let people reserve rooms for people coming into town for weddings. And as part of their agreement with their wedding-related clientele, they would tell people, okay, so you're giving us a deposit for your use of our premises during your wedding. And for everyone of your wedding guests that posts a negative review of our hotel, we're going to fine you $500. So this was a contract that people entered into with the hotel in booking out for their wedding-related activities. And it all blew up when they started trying to enforce this and started telling people, hey, we see that you've put a negative review on Yelp. Did you know that your friend who got married here will get fined $500 if you don't alter this review? So there were some backing and filling kinds of activities from the Union Street Guest House and its management once all of this broke and ticked people off online. But I wanted to talk today about not whether this was a good business strategy, but the legalities of trying to dock people $500 if their guests post a negative review. What do you think, Evan?
When I hear about this, I think, well, this is a perfectly enforceable contract. Again, I just have a lawyer hat on thinking about this, not just like what a polite person would do, because those things are mutually exclusive, right? Lawyers and polite people. So, sure, this is an enforceable contract, presumably, but are there any defenses to its enforcement? And what this sounds like is a liquidated damages provision. And the law is pretty skeptical when it comes to treating liquidated damages provisions. What that is, you breach the contract, and liquidated damages provision is, well, I think this is an example of one, but to define it, you breach the contract and you automatically become liable for some X number of dollars, just by virtue of having violated the contract. And so the courts treat liquidated damages provisions with quite a bit of skepticism. And for them to be enforceable, there's a number of things that have to be met. Like they have to somehow approximate in reality the actual damages that the parties would have suffered because of the breach or what have you. So I guess the whole theme of what I'm saying here is that done correctly, this could very well be a provision in a terms of service if all the elements of contract formation are met, and we show that this liquidated damages provision under the contours set out from the law should be enforceable. And there's nothing otherwise substantively or procedurally wrong with it. These types of things ought to work and ought to be enforceable. But, of course, I've said it, this is the third time I'm saying it now. This is an entirely different issue as to whether or not it's good, whether it's going to enhance your business, and whether it's going to keep you free from the Streisand effect and all these other parade of horribles that can happen to somebody who is kind of acting in a silly way online, business owners who are acting in strange ways like this. You think?
I don't know. We've been talking about the role of third-party intermediaries like Yelp in stepping in where the law might be uncertain. I've seen a couple of commentators, including our friend Professor Goldman, say that they don't think such a contract would be enforced because it was unconscionable or against public policy or various reasons that you step in and sometimes render portions of a contract unenforceable. But I wonder if Yelp might step in and say, we're just going to kick you off our site. We're not going to enable you to be a part of the universe that we send business to if you're treating people this way. Do you think that kind of thing could happen, Allie?
I don't know as much about this kind of issue in Yelp. I do know that they've been pretty active in the SLAPP, like SLAPP suits, and they do seem to be very protective of consumers. So I think that they have an interest in their platform being not being abused. I do know that people were writing comments that like negative comments about the hotel that after this announcement came out that hadn't actually been there. I'm not really sure how. I don't know much about the different Yelp policies and whether you're supposed to have been there before you make a review. But I do think that generally it is a really bad public policy. I can't believe that it was up there on their site that long and that they were actually trying to enforce it. And I think Evan brought up the Streisand effect. It's a classic example, right? When you're trying to hide something and you end up just drawing way more attention to it. And yeah, that's what happens on the internet.
Yeah. I mean, this is another, it's not the same situation as Zelda Williams, but it's another instance of someone having an unpopular being unpopular for whatever reason, justified or not, and having people pile on. Sam, do you think that there's anything Yelp or the law should do either for the guests who are, being somewhat bullied by this hotel and its borderline policy, or the hotel itself that then is getting trolled because people don't like it?
No, honestly, I don't think there should be any legal response here because it all worked out just fine. The hotel did something stupid. Everybody found out about it. And now the hotel has got its just desserts. I mean, I think you have a right to be an idiot online. And that's what this hotel did. So it all worked out from my perspective.
Yep. The internet justice is served, I suppose.
Exactly.
All right. Well, we have lots more coming up in the show, including robot lawyers and stalking one's or someone else's house pets. But before we go there, we want to encourage you to do something that can really help the Twit network. We all, I think, do a lot of shopping on Amazon. Goodness knows I do. From housewares to groceries to my printer just went on the fritz. Had to get a new printer, to Guardians of the Galaxy mixtapes, all things that Amazon is more than happy to deliver up to you. And I have been reminding myself each and every time I go to make one of these purchases lately is before I just automatically go to the Amazon site. Instead, what you want to do is you want to go to twit.tv/Amazon and click on the link from there, the Amazon banner. And then you shop as usual. And that printer or that mixtape or whatever it is that you're picking up will kick a little bit to twit.tv and help us keep the lights on. It's a very easy and efficient way to show your support for the Twit network. You already know the price, selection, and convenience of Amazon.com. And now just bear in mind, just remind yourself that every time you make an Amazon purchase, you can support Twit. It's so easy. You just click through that little banner. You can see it there if you're watching the video. It's at twit.tv/Amazon. Then you shop as usual. It's as simple as that. Costs you nothing extra. And anything you purchase helps us keep things going here at Twit. So it's very important to us. We know that you're out there buying on Amazon all the time. We know that we are. So, go pick up that $8.99 Guardians of the Galaxy mixtape. You will find good uses for it. And if you go to twit.tv/Amazon, you will definitely find yourselves in our hearts and subject of our most grateful sentiments. So thanks so much. There are also links there for Amazon UK and Canada, twit.tv/Amazon. Thank you so much. We really appreciate your support on this. All right, let us move on to some copyright stories. Let's start with plagiarism. This story about BuzzFeed's Benny Johnson, I think is really funny because The Onion actually did a story about this time last year about a BuzzFeed writer resigning in disgrace after plagiarizing 10 llamas who wish they were models. And this was a pure joke, pure lark on The Onion's part, pointing fun at the fact that anyone would, I think, I'm putting myself in the shoes of The Onion right now, and goodness knows that's fraught with danger. But I think what they were driving at is that anyone who thinks that BuzzFeed's content is original to begin with had better go back to their thinking starting point. But that doesn't mean that BuzzFeed doesn't take themselves seriously journalistically, because they had an author, Benny Johnson, a blogger there, who was actually, guess what, cutting and pasting things from other sites and putting them in his BuzzFeed story. So BuzzFeed came out, Benny Johnson is no longer writing for them, and they are taking steps to make sure this kind of thing doesn't happen again. Where have we come, Allie, if BuzzFeed is now the pinnacle of journalistic standards?
I'm actually a fan of BuzzFeed. I do think that they have a lot of good reporters there. I mean, they also have a lot of more frivolous listicles, but I think that there as a platform there are there's some quality there.
All right.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting situation when it's I haven't seen that many people talk about it as infringement. It's mostly been taken as plagiarism, which is more of like a moral issue and not like citing everything so well. Because and I looked at a lot of the examples. There were some that were pretty blatant, but then there were others where it wasn't I'm not defending it, but like kind of a closer call, because you can't own facts. That's one of the exceptions to everything being copyrighted. And I do think that it showed a lot of journalistic integrity for them to decide, for the editors to decide to let him go over this, because there were enough examples where it's just bad. If you're a journalist, just the site's better than that. So I think that it was the right call. Plus, there had in some of the documentation after he was fired, that there had been some other questionable things that he had written about, like not even just like some of the things that were original, but I know there was one about like using Jurassic Park to GIFs for a story about maybe Syria or something. It was so there have been some other even when he's doing original stuff that had been questionable. So I think that it was probably the right call, it gets at some interesting issues about copying words online. And it's the other thing is it's so easy to tell. You can just plug the text into Google or any other search engine, and it's like it's really you can't really get away with it. So if you're a journalist, you should really be better than that.
Evan, are we getting to a point where the web will be split into two camps of things that are purely plagiarized and things that are original? Or do you think that as BuzzFeed experienced here, we're going to find people just tempted by the fact that it's so easy to copy and paste, and they're going to continue to do it, and there will be a journalistic gray area there?
Mm-hmm. I think one of the biggest influences for this whole dynamic would be in the manner in which this content can be monetized. BuzzFeed relies a lot on heavy traffic, search traffic, and so the content is written in a way to generate that search, and it relies on coming up with a lot of content. So there will be this temptation to, I guess what's more accurate to say is there's a lot of pressure to come up with a lot of content, and it's hard work to be original. And then we've got within that mindset this idea of sort of creeping norms of remix culture and fair use. And, one moment somebody can easily be saying, everything that's out there ought to be widely available for reappropriation, and then the next moment be crying foul because of plagiarism. And those facts can just differ in very subtle ways for one reasonably to be taking either position on or either stance on the particular situation. So it's tough. But I sort of heard in your question, sort of framing it as, is the web going to be, is there going to be a schism here of good content and bad? I don't think we need to make any big pronouncements on the web like that. This is just sort of a path along the evolution of the web in the way that different forms of content are in vogue and are monetizable and have value and therefore are generated more. And, the web in 5-10 years will likely look very different regardless of these particular issues.
Sam, I'm curious as to your take on this story. And before I forget here, I'm going to go ahead and drop our first MCLE passphrase into this episode of This Week in Law. We put these phrases in case you are listening for continuing legal or other professional education credit. If you need more information about that, you can go to wiki.twit.tv and find our show there, This Week in Law. Lots of information there for you. We put these phrases in case your oversight body needs to have some sort of concrete proof that you have listened to or watched the show, rather than just, copying and pasting the link to episode 271 of the show and saying, hey, I listened and watched. So you can tell them that that the first passphrase is llama models. And now we'll go to Sam. And as the entrepreneur of a blog yourself, what do you think about all of this, both for your own content and protection of your own content, and competing with the likes of BuzzFeed and the other news outlets that BuzzFeed is seeking to compete with?
Plagiarism is, to some extent, it's a sort of a kind of like the hotel and Yelp. It's a self-punishing thing. If your traffic comes from Google in particular, Google is always on the lookout for duplicate content, and it will downrank the plagiarists. Now, of course, maybe if you just tweak it instead of straight up plagiarizing it, maybe you don't get punished. But there's always been that sort of self-enforcing sanction with plagiarism. Now, BuzzFeed is not big on Google, as far as I know. I think they're more about getting links from social, where that's not the same thing. Twitter and Google Plus and Facebook don't go around looking for duplicate content and pulling it off the site. But yeah, not plagiarizing is kind of the capital offense of journalism. And, BuzzFeed does do great journalism, although not all of those articles could be considered in that category. So it's just I think you have to keep an eye out for plagiarism, and it's a problem for us. We're always getting sites that are scraping lawyerist, and we're finding out about it less now than before. It's interesting because it happens for two reasons. So you've got the BuzzFeed where they're, as Evan said, they're under pressure to produce content, and it's got to be viral and social, and it's got to be stuff that people want to share. And then you have sort of old school search engine optimization, which relied on lots of links back to your site and sucking in as much traffic as you can through that. And so, so that's what a lot of our scraping came from, was people who are trying to game the search engines to get their own traffic. And now that Google has clamped down on that, I think that's why we're not seeing it as much as we used to, but it used to be a big thing. Like I said, I think it's in part a self-enforcing sanction, but yeah, if I were BuzzFeed, I'd fire for plagiarism too. I think it's just part of being in the publishing business. You can't let that go on. So,
well, that's good to hear. Let's move on to a couple of privacy-related stories. Evan, do you think that pets have privacy?
Well, it's not hard to draw a line between the privacy of your pet and the owner of the pet. I think that's probably the best way of at least starting to think about it.
Yes.
I did see a dog food commercial though about low calorie diets for your pet. So that your pet has a right to be healthy, I guess.
That's right. And if the pet insurance companies know that your pet is eating pet junk food, then maybe they would hike up your pet premium. Definitely a privacy issue that people are subjected to. I'm talking about pets and privacy because you found a map that lets you cyberstalk cats all over the world. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. This has been getting quite a bit of coverage lately. It's iknowwhereyourcatlives.com. And it's a really interesting mashup of technology here. It's a professor from a university down in Florida named Owen Mundy. And I'm happy to talk about Professor Mundy because I went to high school with this guy in Bedford, Indiana, of all places. So I was really excited to see this get some coverage, even in the Wall Street Journal, and some really interesting stuff here. But he's actually an art professor, but he's also very much, the way he goes about it is, with digital technology, big data sets. He's all about data portability. So that's the approach that he's coming from on this. But he's developed this tool where it goes out and searches various the content of various photo sharing platforms. I think Flickr and Instagram and others for photos tagged with the word cat, and then it lays those down on top of a Google map. So you can go to iknowwhereyourcatlives.com and find a random cat, or you can browse a particular area. And so it's interesting, it's novel, and it also clearly makes a point about privacy. And it's sort of a call to awareness of the kind of information that can be gleaned about an individual putting their content up. Oh, I guess one important step I missed was that it mines the EXIF data, the metadata, so that it knows where to put it on the map, because the device used to take the photo has it embedded with the photo that the geolocation information. So that's one important step about how it gets onto the map there. So it raises some interesting privacy issues, and something that's interesting to talk about, both for its intrigue and also for the potential dark side on it as well. Because you could just as easily have develop a tool that has the word daughter or son or child on it, and it'd be it'd kind of amp the creep factor up quite a bit on that. But this is more of a benign way of introducing the concept. And it's a little bit reminiscent of a service a few years ago. I think we talked about it on the show, and I don't know even how real it was, but I think it was called something like Please Rob Me. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Where, the people would, or the platform would bring up, I don't know if it was Facebook updates or probably Twitter statuses that would the semantics of it would indicate that the person was away from home, and then talk about how it's, the obvious implications of that. And I remember taking issue with it because you'll remember this, Denise, because robbery is a crime against the person, whereas burglary is the appropriate term here, the crime against the premises. So it should have been please burglarize me. But anyway, so there's all that. It's interesting to see this motif come up again, and I'm particularly happy to see my old friend Owen Mundy doing something cool and getting some press about it on this as well.
I think that one was based on check-ins when people first started checking in on Facebook and Foursquare and things.
That would make sense.
Yes, that if you were checking in elsewhere, you weren't at home. I think you raise a good point, Evan, and so does Professor Mundy, that people need to be aware of the ability to do this kind of thing. Do you think at all, Sam, that there's some paranoia here that, who's really going to go to the effort of trying to do this kind of mapping, or do you think this is important and dangerous?
Yeah, well, I guess I'm curious to know, because I haven't seen anything about it. Has anybody ever actually been robbed as a result of their camera data, or has their cat been kidnapped because of that? And I don't think so. I think it was like a month ago or 2 months ago, my Facebook feed exploded with, privacy panic over EXIF data, whether it was Flickr or Instagram or whatever. I can't remember what it was on. And, somebody was all of a sudden found out that Flickr includes your EXIF data and your geolocation data in your with your photos, and which is kind of duh. They also have great privacy settings so that you can make that non-public. But I think anybody who had used Flickr for longer than 3 months was probably bewildered by the attention. But I think it does make sense to turn off that, don't publish that information if you don't want people to know all about your activities in your home and where your kids are and where they sleep. And sure, I think it's a bad idea to make that public. So.
Evan, is there an easy way to turn off EXIF data that you know of when you're taking pictures from your phone?
Well, there's a couple of things you could do. And I don't hold myself out as an expert on gadgets, but it's easy to turn the location information, the location services off on your device. And then, of course, Windows 7 has a very effective feature for removing the properties in the various fields of metadata. And I'm sure that's one of any dozens of ways that you could do it, before you actually upload the photos to the web. But I guess going from the device to the mobile platform or to the platform is, would make that step more difficult. But I know that, in Flickr, you can pretty easily change the settings as well to not make the EXIF data available as well. So it's not difficult to do that. They may take a little bit of tinkering to do that, but it's certainly not impossible to enhance your locational privacy by taking a few affirmative steps and more than one ways to skin that cat. How do you like that one?
Oh, lordy.
This is one of those things where it's actually really nice to have geolocation data on your phone. Everybody wanted this, and it was a great feature. You just have to be smart about, I would never tell anybody everyone should turn off geolocation data. It's actually pretty awesome to remember where you were when you took a picture. But it requires the users to be on the ball and actually pay attention and change some information maybe if they aren't comfortable with it. So.
Right. Well, what I'm hearing here is a disconnect between how users want to use the photos and share the photos on their phones. And I think how they want to do that is without going through a computer and stripping off data, and what they would like to be possible with those photos after they've posted them, and that no one's really jumped into that breach yet. Do you agree, Allie?
Yeah, so I think that this particular example of the cats, if it's the right article that I'm thinking of, this is people who volunteered their home location for where their which is because their cat lives where they live. I do think that people, I don't know as much about people doing that. I do see people tending to check into different restaurants they might visit, and which is kind of cool because then you can see what other people have had there, or you can have a map of where you've been. But choosing to add your own home sounds like a choice that people should try to be more informed about. Right. I'm not as familiar with people doing that. I do think people want to share when they're in other public places if they want to join the community in that way. But it's definitely an option that they add on. I've actually never used the geolocation feature when I take an Instagram picture.
Well, and I guess the flip side of this is, and we're obviously the pet story has ramifications beyond just being able to locate pets, is the point of Evan bringing it up. But people do want to locate their pets. There's actually a company called Tag, Tagg, that makes it far easier to do the geolocation of your pet because they actually sell a GPS device that you attach to your pet. Now, it doesn't check in the pet on Facebook or anything, but it enables you, if you've ever seen, I think it's an iPhone commercial that has, showing you the usefulness of the device. It has somebody's lost dog running down an alley and they're driving around in the car trying to find the dog, and they're finding it on their phone. And I'm assuming that the way they're doing it is with this tag device because it enables you to, it has an app and it enables you to find your dog or cat if they are out and about in an unsupervised manner. So I guess there definitely is a market of people. I actually was so fascinated with the device, I decided to try it out for our dog Carmel. And I am glad that we have it on the one hand, but it's a real pain. I got to tell you, it's constantly, the battery is not designed well. It constantly needs to be charged, and it goes into battery saving mode only when it's close to its base station. But, how are you going to tell your pet, stay close to that base station or your battery's going to run out? So it's definitely got some implementation issues, but I think the idea that people would have GPS devices on their pets, on their children, is certainly the children one has been around for a while, is something that also has privacy ramifications, don't you think, Kevin?
Yeah, I do. I was daydreaming a little bit by what you were saying, but I'm joining with it for the most part.
All right. Well, let's move on. Aside from vanishing pets, let's talk about vanishing communications and ephemeral communications. Mike Elgin was just talking on Tech News Today before we started our show about Windows Phone possibly developing some sort of Snapchat type functionality. And Mark Cuban actually has something. I don't watch his VC related, I'm funding this show, but I think that's how this came into being. Something called Cyberdust is a business kind of an app that allows for confidential communications. And I bring it up because of the communications. There are a couple of angles to this, I think. Lawyers constantly need to be confidentially communicating with their clients. And Mark Cuban has said that a lot of his users are lawyers. That tip comes to me from our listener, Jim Jensen. Thank you for highlighting this story, Jim. So I could definitely see where there's the legal profession as a whole would like the idea of being able to communicate with clients in a confidential and potentially ephemeral way. And then the other angle I see to this is as these Snapchat kind of clones become not just the toys of teenagers who don't want their silly photographs they take to survive and haunt them later, but become a real sort of mainstream way that people communicate because they're concerned about the ramifications of permanent communications. What does that do to law enforcement? How on earth do we prove lawsuits? Do we prove criminal charges against people if communications all mission impossible self-destruct after 3 seconds? So what do you think, Allie?
I think there's going to be a lot of challenges. I do think that a lot of times law tends to lag behind what's going on in technology and innovation, and I think that if you tried to codify something now based on the current technologies, that has a potential to deter people in investing and innovating and creating new things because they're not sure about the legal ramifications of that. So I think that as laws are changed, they should try to still be vague enough to allow for new things to come about. And I do think it's going to take a lot of qualified legislators to kind of come up with something that is good for law enforcement, good for privacy, good for innovation. There's a lot of challenges will be coming in the next couple of decades. Absolutely, it's going to be interesting.
Evan, would you find it useful to be able to communicate with clients in a way that you felt good about being confidential because those communications weren't going to be discoverable and weren't even going to exist after a while?
Well, there's a couple of different interests here that I see for lawyers using this. One, you've got, the idea of the confidentiality of it, and that's good. But there's also this countervailing interest that the lawyer has to follow the rules of professional conduct in as much as you're required to keep a comprehensive file of what it is that you're working on. And so the rules of professional conduct can touch on that issue, but then also you want to maybe keep a record of what it is that you've done. Not just, sort of the other side of the coin of not having something there that proves you did something wrong, but you may want to have a record to show that you did do something right. So if the lawyer or if the client is accusing the lawyer of malpractice, it'd be awful handy for the lawyer to say, no, here's the communication where I advised you of this, this, and this. It was your decision not to follow that advice that got you in this bad decision, not that I gave you bad advice. So, there's a couple of different ways of looking at it. I see this being much more useful for criminals and liars and fornicators and adulterers. That's what I would see this being useful for. So.
More useful than for lawyers, huh?
Yeah.
All right. What do you think, Sam? One thing that I heard when Jim Jensen brought this to my attention, one thing that crossed my mind is, well, maybe, just maybe, this is a chance for lawyers to get rid of those god-awful email disclaimers that accompany every single communication they send out. Because if things are ephemeral, maybe we don't need to disclaim as much, but maybe those will just get tacked on to ephemeral messages too. What do you think?
They're going to get, they would get tacked on, although they are unnecessary and ridiculous as is. So months ago, a PI firm decided to try and text accident victims. And so they sent a text message, I think while the accident victim was in the hospital, saying, whatever, call the PI lawyers at whatever. And they actually ran it by the ethics authority or potentially the court. I'm not sure. In any case, somehow somebody ended up issuing a decision on it. And they said, that's fine, no big deal, but you have to send out this long disclaimer. So instead of sending one text message, you had to send 10 or 15 text messages to get the whole thing in. And I think that had to go first. So what they did was they said, sure, it can be ethical, but you just have to obey the rules. And part of the rules are you need this long disclaimer. So they made it impractical instead of unethical, which, I can imagine that same thing being applied to Snapchat or whatever, because, it doesn't obviate your ethical responsibilities just because you're using a new platform. And every time a new platform comes out, some lawyer thinks it's totally different and they should just go ahead and use it and not worry about the old rules. But the old rules still apply and often for good reasons. And so, they're still there. I think, it's an interesting question. If you start using Snapchat to plan crimes with your clients, is that, is it spoliation if you let it expire? But, who knows?
So what do you think?
Not,
do you think that lawyers will embrace this kind of technology or stay away from it?
Well, in about 10 years, I think lawyers will start using it. So.
Because that's about when they'll realize that it exists. Yes.
Well, we joke on, Aaron and I joke about lawyers, we're a media site, right? So we pay attention to, trends in advertising and stuff. And, we think we've got about 5 years to react to whatever BuzzFeed decides is the future of advertising, because, our industry just doesn't move at the head of the curve. And I think that's probably a good thing most of the time, but it's just, I think lawyers who jump out on the cutting edge generally have to include within their calculations, is it going to be worth the ethics investigation that is inevitably going to follow when you're the first person to jump out ahead? And, not many lawyers do it as a result. But yeah, lawyers will try it. I mean, I know that there are lawyers using Snapchat with their clients now. I'm not sure exactly what for, obviously, but maybe just for quick messages back and forth. And, lawyers use text messaging with their clients and stuff too. And, it's fine if they want to. So lawyers will use it. I'm not sure that it's like super useful, and I'm not drafting a post, 10 ways lawyers ought to use Snapchat with their clients. But,
Right.
but I think it's going to happen just because it's a way to communicate that people want to use. So.
Hey, Evan, getting back to the harassment and bullying topic we were on a bit earlier, do you think these kinds of communications that they need to be looked at as dangerous in that regard, that law enforcement and legislators will find themselves, legislators have been in the various states and even at the federal level looking at how we put a stop to people being harassed and abused and bullied, et cetera. Does this just make it easier for people to stay anonymous on the one hand, and harder to prove that anything untoward happened?
Sure. I mean, I think it would enhance anonymity because the ephemeral nature of the content and presumably the ephemeral nature of the metadata that would help you. I'm using the term metadata pretty broadly there. All the different information that would lead guide one down the path of identifying who it was who originated the message. And sure. So yeah, it would be easier. Yeah, it could be even more harassing because of that factor of it as well. But I get the impression that most of these technologies are being used pretty consensually. And one of the big elements, loosely speaking, again, not necessarily as an element of the crime or whatever, but one of the maybe it is one of the elements of the crime of harassment is that it's an unwanted communication, and a lot of these privacy enhancing platforms and devices are where both parties really have to go through the efforts to use specific technologies so that they can communicate confidentially like this. It's not in the same nature of just having a phone number that is available to receive text messages, and that phone number is widely available to everybody. There's a bit more effort that goes into it, at least for now. I mean, that's likely to change as these technologies become more widely adopted, and you can have the capacity to get more unsolicited communications or communications that are more difficult to block. So I think there needs to be a little bit of a change in the way that these technologies are used before the problem would really come about that you're talking about. But sort of we'll just hear, you will see that come into play perhaps then with those difficulties that we were talking about at the beginning of those comments right there.
Right. Let's move on to gazing ahead at the future of robotics and jobs and the law. Traditionally, we welcome our robot overloads on this show rather frequently and talk about how super intelligent AI can be a very, very scary thing, and yet how incremental changes in technology and automation of processes is bound to impact the world of professionals, including lawyers, and how we resolve legal disputes. There's a new study out from the folks at Pew Internet called AI Robotics and the Future of Jobs. And so the interesting thing about this particular study is while, we've seen in the past how robotics can impact more blue-collar kinds of jobs, this one takes aim directly at folks in the medical and legal and other kind of white-collar professions where it's becoming more and more common for robots to be able to perform those kinds of tasks. I think, Sam, you pointed to the 10 best paying jobs of 2014 as reported in the Wall Street Journal. And most of them involve being a doctor or a dentist of some kind. Petroleum engineer and air traffic controller make their way in that list. And so does attorney down at the end. And I think if you read this Pew Internet study, all of those jobs might be at risk as AI becomes more sophisticated and prevalent. So tossing it out to you, Sam, again, you were already saying how the legal field doesn't pay too much attention to trends and current developments, and maybe it'll just wake up sometime 20 or 30 years from now and find that laws are being made legal decisions are being resolved by and litigants are being represented by a more artificially intelligent life form. What do you think?
Well, there are lawyers in both Star Trek and Battlestar Galactica, so I think we're pretty safe. Look, if we get real AI, true AI, then everything is out the window. It's the moment after we really have artificially intelligent computers and the singularity comes, then who knows what happens? I think the better question is not are artificially intelligent robots going to replace lawyers, but how will lawyers be necessary in a post-singularity world or a post-AI world? In the meantime, is the very limited AI that we have really a danger to lawyers? I have a hard time thinking that it is. Real AI is such a long way off, and maybe when you factor in the speed of technology, maybe it actually is close, but it feels a long way off still. So I don't think our jobs are in danger in the near future. What I think is more interesting about that Pew Internet, I'm trying to remember. I better pull up that Pew Internet study because I can't remember. I think that was based on never mind. Anyway, I guess I just don't think we're in immediate danger. I think the greater danger just comes from better DIY forms. I wrote the other day about sort of the difference, and maybe it's more of a scale where on the one end you have do it yourself, and not everybody wants to do their own legal work, and probably nobody should, but some people want to. And at the other end you have push button legal work, which is virtually the same as going to a lawyer. You say, here's my legal problem, fix it for me, and the lawyer gives you back a solution. Well, if you can push a button on a website and get the solution, why would you go to a lawyer? I think that's where the greater danger is, and we're pretty close. I mean, Google and Facebook and everything has APIs. So why do you need to take all of that time to fill in a long form to do your will when a quick public record search and pushing a button that says, yeah, approve this connection to my Facebook and Google accounts could probably fill out that form for you, and you might have one or two questions left, and then they can just spit out the will. Nobody's done it yet, but I think you could do it with today's technology. I don't think we need to forecast robots and artificial intelligence. We just need a decent will and a few API connections, and then I think you could actually do push button transactional work. I think that's the greater near future danger to lawyers, is that somebody actually puts that together and runs with it. I think it's just a matter of nobody's done it yet.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I think you're absolutely right that is going to be something that we see in the future, and that it's not going to work perfectly at first either, and that there will be a lot of headaches about it. But that it's sort of a vendor relationship management, VRM approach to basic legal tasks. And apparently the ABA and Rocket Lawyer have buried the hatchet. So, we definitely already have, it's not quite the push button legal realm that you were envisioning, Sam, but there's still a lot of automated, if this is your problem, we have the solution kinds of tools that are available right now, aren't there?
The ABA Rocket Lawyer thing is just, I think it's kind of a weird collaboration. I don't really think I understand that, but they haven't really been forthcoming about what the plan is either. So I guess I don't really know the shape of the collaboration. But it's interesting, and that could be sort of a forecast of the future right there. I don't know. I guess we'll know better when we see more what it's going to look like.
Can you tell us what we know right now about that collaboration?
I think that's all we know. What the press release has, all it said is that they are going to collaborate, and the goal is to increase access to justice, is my understanding, that it's going to be targeted at low-cost legal services, low-income clients, which is good. I mean, this is the first concrete step that the ABA has taken. I'm not sure everybody's going to agree with it, but I don't think the ABA has done anything other than say we need more access to justice in the last couple of years. Maybe they have, and I'm not aware of it. I don't want to be unfair to the ABA, but I think it's been mostly committees and reports, not action. And so maybe this is the first action the ABA has actually taken. And if so, it's potentially positive. I guess until we know more about the outlines of the deal, it's hard to know. But what it looks like is, what it initially looked like to me was more the ABA is getting into lead generation and marketing, not access to justice. So now that they've emphasized that end of it, I'm a little more optimistic on it.
So Evan, have you checked out Jibo on Indiegogo, the world's first family-friendly robot?
Looks like fun. I was reminded of the Jetsons a little bit, but it could be someone interesting to have around the house. A good companion, helpful companion, interactive. You wouldn't get as lonely.
Right. It'll read to you. It'll take, if you're a child or anyone, I suppose, if you need to be read to. God knows I love audiobooks. It will take pictures and has facial recognition to help it take decent pictures, apparently. It looks very interesting, and it does look like something that is striving to be the thing that you go to in your home and ask questions of when you have questions, maybe legal questions.
They show it. They make it look like it's moving around, but it just sits there. You actually have to pick it up and move it from room to room if you want it to move around.
Right. I think its little top part moves.
Well, no, I mean, it looks around and stuff, but there's no wheels on it.
Right.
It can't drive itself around your house yet.
Yeah. I think it's an interesting concept. Dr. Cynthia Braziel, if I'm not butchering her name too badly, is its instigator. Allie, do you think that personal assistance like this, first of all, I could see there would be potentially liability considerations for folks like Dr. Braziel for products like this in various ways. And also I could see where it might start filling needs for us in ways that we're used to from computers or professionals, say. So do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a really interesting new innovation, especially if it's going to be affordable for consumers. This is the first I've heard of it, but I do find it really interesting that it's being crowdfunded in this way, which kind of can guarantee that there is demand up front for something this modern and crazy to be available to average people. I had one thing I wanted to jump in before on the last topic, which was I think. I mean, I'm a lawyer. We're all lawyers. It would be great if people could have if there were less need for expensive lawyers. I mean, I know that, and especially in the patent context, like we patent reform and talking about fighting trolls in that context, we're all about people, startups and companies spending more money on innovation and R&D than on lawyers and litigation costs and keeping these engineers busy by legal issues. I haven't written as much about the legal disruption, but one of my colleagues on Disco, Glenn Manishin's written a couple posts on legal disruptions and disrupting the legal industry. And but all of these issues of new technologies replacing human tasks are really interesting, and there's going to be a lot of kind of see how people react, how Congress reacts, how courts react. It's going to be a lot of exciting. There are going to be definitely issues for there's going to be need for lawyers still about some of this stuff. A lot of questions.
All right. Well, does anyone remember the name of the Jetsons robot? It was Rosie, right? Rosie the maid?
Yeah, I think so.
Rosie. So Rosie's going to be our second MCLE passphrase for this episode of This Week in Law. Thank you, Evan. And we have some resources and tips for you before we go ahead and make our way out of here. First comes from lawyerist.com. Actually, I don't have a tip. I have a couple of resources, but no tips. So if anyone has a good legal tip, now would be the time to think about it. I'll do the resources and then I'll go around and see if anyone has a good tip that jibes with anything we've discussed today or otherwise. But our first resource is from Lawyerist, Sam's site. And you know how we love to talk on this show about the wonderful, snarky, clever, put lawyer in their places kind of responses to cease and desist letters that become internet famous from time to time. Well, if you've ever been looking for a good repository of those, there's a great post on Lawyerist that has several of them, 9 of them to be precise. I'll go ahead and let you guys go read them yourselves. Some of them we've covered on the show. Sam, do you have a favorite?
The Groucho Marx one I hadn't seen before, and it's really good. It's really amusing, especially that he kept on. He didn't drop it. He just kept on being Groucho Marx when they tried to get serious with him. But I think the Cleveland Browns response is probably the greatest response to a legal threat of all time. So
that's the one where the lawyer wrote back to someone complaining about paper airplanes at a Browns game, and said it was sort of more, hey, you need to be careful, be aware that some Snape is writing ridiculous letters and signing your name to them.
Yeah, it's so good. That's the one that it kind of killed the genre. That was the greatest one, in my mind.
That was in-house counsel for the Cleveland Browns, and you're right. He just kind of threw the mic on the stage and walked off at that point.
That was definitely a drop the mic response.
Yep. And let's see, the Groucho Marx one had to do with Casablanca, the classic Bogart Bergman movie, and the Marx Brothers, A Night in Casablanca. So go check these out if this is a genre of literature that you are interested in. Also, a good resource here from the copyright librarian. I'm trying to remember. That's Nancy Sims, and I think we've had her on the show before. In any event, there was a wonderful little infographic that was making the rounds that purported to be a flowchart for the terms, laws, and ethics for using copyrighted images. And Nancy Sims had some issues with the conclusions drawn in the flowchart. So did her own version, sort of, if I can use an old blogging term, fisking that flowchart, going through it and line by line saying, okay, no, this section is just plain wrong. This one's okay. This is iffy. This is not quite on. So if you were planning to use that flowchart as your touchstone toward using copyrighted images in your posts online, say, or anything else you might be doing online with them, go ahead and check out Nancy Sims' commentary on it before, and of course, none of this is legal advice, but you want to be as informed as you can if you're trying to make your way through that minefield. So anybody got any tips for me and for our audience that they want to share? Going. Okay, I think we're going to be tipless this week, but we did give you 2 resources. So there you go. And I think that that's going to do it for the show. It's been really fun. We covered a lot of ground. I really appreciate your joining us from CCIA and the wonderful Project Disco blog, Allie Sternburg.
Thanks again for having me. It was really fun.
Allie, is there anything going on with you that you want to share with folks before we go ahead and clear out today? Any talks or things people should be paying attention to?
This has just been the summer of filings. There's just been like copyright office after another, and barely have had a chance for other things. Personal news, I'm excited that I'm recording an album, so I'm trying to be more creative on the side.
Tell us about
in terms of other things, we tend to blog on Disco. It's project-disco.org about interesting things that we're doing or that are going on in the news about disruptive competition and innovation, a lot of IP issues, mostly copyright, competition. So that's generally the place to look to see what CCIA is thinking about. So check it out. And thanks again for having me.
Sure. And tell us about your album.
Yeah.
Is it 60s,
So
70s, funky-fied kind of music or something else?
that's definitely my inspiration. I'm a huge Beatles classic rock fan, but then I'm a girl who plays piano, so it doesn't always come out that way. But I try to have those influences. Definitely a big fan of the pre-72 era. So I appreciate seeing that soundtracks in the news. That's a great era for music. I'm gonna have to check it out. And Guardians of the Galaxy. I'm gonna see it. Thanks for all the recommendations.
Sure, our pleasure. And Sam, great meeting you. Wonderful insights for us today. Are you still here? Sam Glover, thank you so much for joining us.
I think we lost Sam. So.
We lost Sam. Sam, wonderful site. We love your site, lawyerist.com. We are so glad that Sam was able to join us right up until the very end of the show here. And you guys should check out his blog. It's really cool. And Evan, it's great to see you again. Wonderful to have you back.
Yes, great to be back. Enjoyed our conversation. Allie, really nice to meet you. I've read your stuff. Some of your stuff. You've written a lot of stuff. I haven't read it all, but it's great to meet you on the show, and was excited to have you here, and so I've really enjoyed it. So it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah,
sure.
It's awesome.
Yeah, Evan and I are both avid readers of Project Disco, and I'm certain that we talked about your 6 Seconds Vine copyright post when Vine first came out and considered the copyrightability of those. Oh, Sam is back. Yay. Sam, we wanted to, we're ending the show, but we wanted to thank you and say goodbye. Great to see you. It's been really wonderful chatting with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. This was good fun.
Anything else you want to let people know about before we sign off and get out of here?
Stop by Lawyerist and make sure you follow us somewhere. That would be awesome.
All right. We'll do that. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
And thank you all for joining us for This Week in Law. As you may know, we record this show live at 11 o'clock Pacific time, 1800 UTC, every single Friday, except for like Fridays after Thanksgiving, that kind of thing. So we're really thrilled that you can be here with us live. It's fun if you can do that, and you can jump in IRC with us at irc.twit.tv and follow right along with the show. But if you can't watch live with us, don't worry about it. We are on demand in various ways at twit.tv/twill, at youtube.com/thisweekinlaw. We're on iTunes and on Roku. And so find us in a way that is convenient for you. Put us on your mixtape and listen to us when you can. The whole Twit network makes a great mix, we think. What else should I tell you? You should get in touch with us between the shows. You can email me and Evan. He is Evan at twit.tv. I am Denise at twit.tv. And you can get in touch with us on Twitter. He's Internet Cases there. I am D. Howell there. We also have Facebook and Google Plus pages and communities for folks who have a bit more to say. We love hearing from you about your feedback on our guests, our shows, our topics, further things you think that you'd like to add to the discussion, or things you'd like us to be paying attention to and possibly discuss on the show, guests you'd like to see on the show, all of that. We'd love to hear from you. And we love getting together with you every Friday to do This Week in Law. We will see you next week. Take care.